Hey everybody, how you doing? For those of you who have not seen me in a little while, you're probably going to watch me on the video and say, "Holy cow, he looks pretty darn good." And then others who don't know the whole situation are going to look at me and say, "Wow, he looks like death warmed over," or "Wow, he looks like he's got one foot in the grave and the other one on a banana peel." Right now, I'm kind of feeling a little bit of both of those. Just want to tell you right now, I'm probably going to do this little video in a couple of different segments, just because it's still having a hard time breathing after my operation and lung bleeding and infection and everything else that's been going on. So I'm gonna probably take a few breaks and I'll piece it together and put together one video at the end. So hopefully you can kind of follow along with what's going on. Most of you are I've already reached out to you and kind of let you know what was going on, and you kind of know my situation, but just kind of wanted to get into a few of the details. And I appreciate a lot of you reached back out to me either shortly before or shortly after the operation and or operations, which I'll get into that. But I just did not have the energy or the voice or whatever it was going to take to respond. I was suffering from a condition they call ICU delirium, which, yeah, I don't know if it's the drugs, the noise, the whatever, but an ICU ward is ridiculously loud. There's stuff going on all the time. And I got to the point where when the anesthesia was wearing off from the surgeries, again, I'll come back to that. Um, I was seeing flashing lights. People were showing up. I'd close my eyes and I just knew they were there. So I started talking and rambling on. I'd open my eyes and there's nobody there. It was the weirdest experience I've ever had. And that went on for 3.5 days. Because basically I was getting absolutely no sleep. I might doze off for 30 seconds, maybe a minute. My eyes would pop open and I'm thinking, where in the heck am I? It was ridiculous. And I hope nobody ever has to go through that. So anyway, let me start from the beginning on where and how I ended up where I'm at. So about 4 years ago, I got a new primary care doctor at the VA, and I went in for just a regular checkup, annual physical, and she was listening to my heart, and she says, "Oh, how long have you had a heart murmur?" And I said, "What's a heart murmur?" She said, "Nobody's ever told you had a heart murmur before?" I said, "No, nobody's ever said a word about it." And she explained what a heart murmur was, that it's your heart has several different valves, and this one happened to be on the aortic valve, where what the valve is supposed to do is, when they're healthy, the heart is a big pump divided into several different chambers, and the aortic chamber, or where this particular one was, that chamber receives the freshly oxygenated blood from the lungs. And what's supposed to happen is that valve closes, the heart squeezes, it pumps that oxygenated blood through the rest of your system. As soon as it pumps it out, this valve, another one over here closes, this one opens, fresh blood comes in, and it just kind of keeps repeating that process. But with this, what ended up being what they called severe aortic stenosis, is the valve tissue was getting hard and brittle. And when the flaps would close, they either weren't closing completely or they're only closing 60%, 50%, 80%. It kind of varied. And every time it did not close properly, back pressure would cause the blood to flow back into that chamber where it wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be going the other direction. And it creates like a murmuring sound. So that's how the doctor was able to tell. So, hold on. So this, by the way, I just got home from the emergency room last night. Not emergency room. I got out of the hospital last night after all the surgeries and stuff. I actually had a pretty decent night's sleep. Pretty relaxing, comforting this morning. A comfortable morning. I sat in my recliner most of the time, keeping my feet up. The actual pain from the operation, for the most part, is gone. I have a little bit of aches. If I have to cough or sneeze, heaven forbid, then I can feel it. But just getting up and walking around, there's not a whole lot of pain. But again, it's just a shortness of breath. So they're going to be setting me up with a whole bunch of exercises that I'm going to be doing at home, kind of focusing on the respiratory therapy, the cardiac therapy, and the physical therapy. I'm going to be going for short walks, and every day, a couple times a day, I'll extend those out, go 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 8 minutes, and so on, until eventually they want me walking at least 30 minutes nonstop every single day. And that's at the point where I'm not going to be considered normal, because I never really was normal, but physically is back to normal as I'm probably going to get for a while. And that's when I can pretty much resume just about any activities that I really want, obviously within reason. So anyway, I got off track for a little bit. So my primary care doctor set up a consult with a cardiologist through the VA. They did an echocardiogram, which is like an ultrasound of the heart, EKGs, CAT scan or CT scan, whatever you call that. Did all kinds of stuff, did blood workup, and he determined that yes, I did have at that time what he was considering mild aortic stenosis. He didn't think it would be too serious. This is about 4 or 5 years ago. And shortly after that, I kind of started feeling every once in a while a little twinge, a little squeezing in my chest. It only lasts for like 2 seconds, boom, and it would go away. Went to see him the next year. They did another echo. Results were about the same. A little over a year ago, did one. Even then, he kind of said, yeah, it doesn't really be getting that much worse. He said, but let's check it out in about a year. And he wanted to go, I forget exactly the name for it, but it's where they go in through down your esophagus. They put you under, go down your esophagus and basically get an echocardiogram from the backside of your heart. Gives them a much better picture of what's going on. Well, that was actually scheduled to happen right about now. But unfortunately, in recent weeks, I had a few episodes and never had a chance to get in for that particular test. Probably starting a couple months ago, I had these episodes. Again, I just thought it was indigestion, really wasn't sure what it was. Kind of a slight squeezing. It said, take a few breaths, relax for a little bit, go away. I could resume what I was doing, exertion, other activities, no big deal. But those little episodes and events kept getting more and more frequent. So about 3 weeks ago, a buddy of mine, Andy, took me to a concert he had tickets to in Hampton Beach. And we walked from the parking lot. It's not a steep hill, but it's just a slight upgrade to get to the boardwalk out in front of the Hampton Beach Casino Ballroom. And I get to the top of the hill, and I'm like winded. And I said, Andy, I got to sit down for a minute. He said, you all right? He knew what I was going through because he had a heart attack about 15 years ago, had a triple bypass. So he kind of recognized some of the signs and symptoms. And I said, no, I think it's just indigestion. Same thing. Maybe I was lying to myself because I knew maybe what was going on. I don't know. But so I sat 5 minutes or so. Everything was fine. I felt great. We stopped at a restaurant. We had some dinner. We went to the concert. Everything was good. But he made me promise the next morning I would go see somebody, or maybe that night if I felt it again. And I didn't feel anything that night, but I did wake up the next morning. I felt a slight squeezing again. Relaxed. Okay. It went away. One of my coworkers, Aaron, he noticed it about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I was on one of my job sites. And he even asked me, you okay? It was the same thing going on. But after resting for a few seconds, it just kind of went away. I didn't really think much of it. Well, finally, on the Saturday morning of when I went to the emergency room, I started feeling it at home, but it went away and I was okay. I felt fine. So I decided to drive myself to the urgent care at the VA. And I walked in and told them, I said, I got a little squeezing sensation. All hell broke loose. And the lady even told me she thinks she's going to go really fast around here right now. So be prepared. So they took me into a triage room, stripped me down, put on the EKG probes and took my blood, put in an IV, gave me oxygen, doing all kinds of stuff. Well, the doctor came right in and he basically said, look, we're an urgent care center here. We're not a trauma cardiac center. So I'm going to call for an ambulance. We're going to transfer you to CMC Medical Center in Manchester, which is one of the premier heart hospitals in all of New England. So he said, you'll be in good hands over there. So a little while later, the ambulance showed up. They brought me over there, checked me into the emergency room, ran a bunch of tests there, realized that I wasn't currently having an active cardiac arrest situation. So they put a monitor on me and then they started running tests. And they ran every test you can imagine. They even went so far as x-raying my teeth. And I thought that was kind of weird. And I even asked them, well, why would you x-ray my teeth? Well, it's because of infection. A lot of people that might have heart issues, if they have like an impacted tooth, they don't want that infection to be impacting your recovery from the heart surgery. So they just wanted to make sure that I didn't have anything bad going on my mouth and everything was fine. So, but anyway, so that was all day one at the emergency room and the initial check-in for the cardiac center. Well, then I went to the second day, and they ran some more tests, did a lot of blood work, and what they ended up doing was they ran a catheter up my right wrist, and it's a probe that goes up, and basically they can look at your heart from the inside. It's fairly minimally invasive, I guess, but they kind of gave me some happy juice, so I didn't know what was going on, but they were able to look at all of the rest of the aortic blood vessels, and they said everything looked really good. There was no sign of clogs, there's no sign of hardening of the arteries. The only thing was that aortic stenosis, which they said seemed to be pretty obvious. So they came down, talked to me. All right, so I'm back. I took a little break. So I don't exactly remember where I left off, but I kind of want to jump ahead to the actual surgery parts itself. Remember I said surgeries, plural. So they got me all prepped. Doctor explained basically what they were going to do. They had to make an incision down my breastbone. I'm going to show you a nice little scab. I'm not going to take it all off, but you see it starts up about here, goes down to about there, and then right below it, I have 3 nice little incisions here where they had some big chest tubes going in. I had one chest tube in up here, another one down here, and another chest tube here. I had 2 of them right up here on my neck on this side, and another one on my neck right on this side. And eventually I had another one put in my back behind my right lung. So basically what happened was they put me under, brought me in general anesthesia, put me completely under, cut you open, take a saw, they cut the breastbone, put on a rib spreader, basically peels your ribs apart. Now my heart is right there. They can pick it up, take it right out of your body. And that's kind of what they had to do, because they had to cut off the old aortic valve. They put you on a heart-lung machine, which keeps pumping the blood, keeps the oxygen flowing while your heart, they basically stop your heart. They installed temporary pacemaker wires onto it with an external box just until the whole procedure was done. And those wires eventually got pulled out, but that little pacemaker and the heart-lung machine is what was kind of keeping me alive during this whole procedure. So they got done with their whole deal. Next thing I know, I'm waking up in ICU right as they're pulling the breathing tube out of my throat. And I'll tell you, I have never, ever in my life experienced anything more traumatic than that. And I guess in the ICU community, I am that guy. And I guess my arms were flailing, and I was pushing, and I was swinging, and I was ready to fight. And it felt like, have you ever seen in the movies where like somebody's drowning and they're going down and looking up at their loved ones for their very last minute, but they can't see them, and then everything goes black? That's the feeling I had. I felt like I was drowning and I was going to die right then and there. Absolutely awful. I sincerely hope none of you ever have to experience anything like that. It was bad. It was real bad. So anyway, I finally kind of come back to my senses. I'm back in the ICU. About 4 or 5, maybe 6 hours later, the surgeon comes in to talk to me, say how I'm doing. I said, well as can be expected for a person that just had their chest ripped open. He kind of said, yeah, I know it's not an easy thing. And he said, just want to let you know, he said, we have a slight problem. Okay, what's that? Well, apparently a couple hours after the operation, after they closed me up, they did a chest x-ray, and my whole chest cavity outside of my lungs was filling up with blood. And they didn't know why. So they were going to have to go back in, open me up, and do this all over again. See where the problem was. And I was not very happy and thrilled to hear that news. So I said, well, if that's what it takes to keep me alive, then yeah, go ahead. And of course, he makes me sign these little authorization forms as I'm all doped up. I don't know if they would hold up in court or not if anything happened, but whatever. And the anesthesia guy, the anesthesiologist, came to talk to me again. Of course, I had to sign his little form saying that I'm not going to hold him responsible or whatever. And I told him, I said, look here, buddy. I said, I know you have a job to do. I said, but, and I explained to him about pulling that chest tube out the first time. I said, I absolutely do not want to experience that again. So if there's anything possible you can do to make that different, please do it. And he said, I'll do what I can, right? So within minutes, boom, I was already back asleep. And next thing I know, I'm looking up and I'm seeing bright lights and people looking down at me and, Mr. Page, you with us? Are you awake? And I said, yeah. Where am I? He said, well, we're all done. You're back in the ICU. I said, you got the chest tube out? And they said, yeah, everything went fine. Whew. Okay, so now I'm in a lot of pain. And as you can imagine, having my chest ripped open twice in the span of about 14 hours. Well, a few hours later, the surgeon comes in to see me again. And he says, how you doing? And I said, I'm doing okay, doing all right. And he said, well, I just want to let you know that, he said, we still might not be done. And what was left of my heart sunk right in my chest. And I said, basically WTF, what's going on now? Well, apparently they couldn't get my blood pressure up. And one side of my chest, like it was really, really low. And they didn't think that I was going to be able to, my heart would be able to sustain enough blood pressure to keep me alive, basically. And they didn't know why. So what they were going to do, they would completely open me up again. But now they went through my other wrist with that catheter, and they were able to look at my heart. And apparently what they didn't see the first time around, there was one heart vessel of some sort, cardiac vessel of some sort, that either had a partial blockage, partial collapse, whatever, but it was just enough that whatever chamber that was supposed to be pumping, it was having an effect. So they went in, they were able to put in a stent and open it up, and my blood pressure started coming up. It was still very low, but it was up. So that was pretty much the extent of the surgery. Well, no, I guess not quite yet. So the last procedure, I guess, which would be considered surgical, was I was having a hard time breathing after all this. So I don't know if you know, but so just so you know, I'm not a doctor, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express several times. So I don't know if that absorbed and sunk into me. But anyway, the last procedure they had to do is like 2 days later. I just absolutely could not breathe. They had me on high levels of oxygen, but I just could not breathe. So they took me down. They did a CT scan, did another chest X-ray from multiple angles, and my whole right lung, not inside the lung, but the pleura cavity on the outside of the lung, was filled up with blood, and it was putting pressure, squeezing in on my right lung. So when I breathed, the lung was not expanding, and it wasn't drawing in and passing oxygen through my body like it was supposed to. So what they ended up doing was, that's that scar in my back, where I have a scar, is they put in a chest tube. They just put a local anesthesia. They did it right there in my hospital bed. I actually sat up on the edge of the bed and leaned against my little tray table while they did the procedure. But they put in a chest tube that she said was about the size of my pinky finger. And they numbed it up, they put it in. I didn't look at it, I wasn't watching obviously, but I could hear the blood draining out. And as it's draining, I could literally feel my right lung starting to expand. And she said, it's going to feel good and then it's going to hurt for a while. But she said it's going to feel, not that you've ever had the bends, but she said it would feel like people that get the bends from like diving and pressure differences, whatever. I guess they feel like little crackly air bubbles up in their shoulder areas and that area in the neck. And sure enough, I started feeling a little pain up there. But considering the fact that I could actually take a deep breath, it was like instant relief. And that was probably, if there was anything good that came out of my stay in that hospital, it was that one moment right there, because I was finally able to breathe. And normally I was never a panic attack or a anxious or anxiety type of a person. It never really bothered me. But those first few days, not being able to breathe properly, I was having some serious anxiety attacks. I don't know if I talked to you about the ICU delirium part. If not, I just wanted to touch back because something just popped into my head. So ICU delirium, you're laying there, there's no sleep, you're on drugs, there's lights, there's bells and beepers and buzzers and people running all over the place. It's an extremely loud place to be. You can't get any sleep. And for almost 3.5 days probably, I did not sleep more than about 30 seconds at a time. And there was one thing in particular that I'll remember for the rest of my life, was Metallica, right? The band Metallica. They put out, I have no idea what the album is called, I've never owned it, but I've heard it, where it's just a heavy metal, guitars, bass, drums, loud, just cranking music, right? A lot of distortion. That album kept playing over and over and over and over in the back of my head. And I even had to ask the nurse, I said, look, can you tell whoever's in that next cubicle to turn their stereo down? She said, what are you talking about? And I said, somebody's playing Metallica. I said, don't get me wrong, I like Metallica, but I don't like Metallica when I'm in the ICU trying to sleep. And she said, first off, there's nobody next door. Nobody's playing any music in here. And I said, I can hear it. You can't hear that? It's as plain as day. And she said, no, I can't hear it. I said, well, all right. And, and I would doze off for about 30 seconds. And all of a sudden, I was having the most vivid dreams you can imagine. It's like there's people I haven't seen since I was in junior high school that all of a sudden I'm talking to them. I'm having a conversation with them. And I open my eyes expecting them to be right there, but there's nobody there. My parents have both been dead for a couple of years anyway. And I was having conversations with my mom and dad. In my subconscious, I knew they weren't there, but it was so realistic. And I was having such delirium that, but again, when I'd open my eyes, okay, it's just a dark corner of the room, bright in the hallway, and there was nobody there. It was the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. So, just another little interesting thing that happens to you if you ever have to go in for open heart surgery or any major surgery, I guess, where you're stuck in the ICU. So anyway, that's kind of the medical history of what happened while I was in the hospital. And I was kind of bedridden for a couple of days, although after day 2, they made me get up and start walking, start going to the bathroom. I never had to use a bedpan, fortunately. I did have a catheter in for a while, so it just kind of drained into a tube, so I really didn't care. But, one other thing I don't know if I talked about it yet was the fluid gain. I gained something ridiculous, like almost 40 pounds of fluids. And so they gave me this, it's a diuretic, I forget, Lasix, which basically makes you pee pretty much constantly. I had a catheter for the first day of it, so I really didn't care. It just drained. But then they took that out. So now I physically had to go pee. And with all the other pain and everything else I'm doing, literally every 5 minutes I had to pee. Every 5 minutes. And in one day, I lost 11 pounds from all fluid. The next day, I lost 10.5 pounds doing nothing but peeing out. And then they drained my chest on that third day, and a full liter of blood weighed about another 3 or 4 pounds. So I gained 40 pounds in 3 days, but I peed out like 25 of it in the next 2.5 days. And I've been kind of on these until yesterday. No, the day before I got out of the hospital, and they weighed me as I was leaving the hospital, and I weighed the exact same thing as I did the day I checked in. So any weight gain, any loss, it's kind of all balanced out in the end. But some of you are still looking at me thinking, wow, he still looks like he's lost a lot of weight. And I have, because about 6 months ago, I just decided, you know what, I need to start being a little more healthy. And I knew that this heart murmur thing was going to go on. And when I had talked to my cardiologist, he told me, he said, even losing 10 pounds is going to help you out tremendously. So I said, well, I'm going to show him. Well, I went out and lost over 50 pounds. And I lost 50, I gained 4 or 5 of it back, but I was just maintaining. So overall, I was about 45 pounds down from before when I originally started my diet. Actually was feeling pretty good. And then I started having these stupid episodes with my heart valve. So I don't know if it's a good thing, maybe not. But after the first surgery, the doctor said that by looking at the EKGs, looking at the blood work, looking at the physical heart valve that he pulled out, he said he could see there was indicators. I don't know if they're visual, I don't know how they tell, but again, I'm not a doctor. But there are indicators of previous heart attacks. And he couldn't give me an exact number, but he said there were indications of what he put more than several previous heart attacks. Didn't even know I had a heart attack. But as I'm thinking back on it, all these little episodes that I was having where I'd get a little squeezing sensation, a little short of breath, but no major pain. It wasn't shooting down my arm or up my neck or anything like that. Just that little squeezing sensation, maybe a little bit of a stiff neck, a little shortness of breath. But after 3, 4, 5 minutes, I'd sitting down and relaxing. Go away, I was fine. No problems. But apparently, those were all little heart attacks. And he said, with these little indicators, every time it's basically like, punching a ticket when you get your free coffee at the end. He said, I pretty much had maybe one punch left, and that was going to be it. And he said, it probably would not have even had to have been a major heart attack. He said, if I would have been out and about somewhere, nowhere near a hospital, and I had that final heart attack, he said, considering the condition of that aortic valve, he said, there would probably be no saving me. He said, it probably would have killed me. So fortunately, I finally listened to myself and listened to my family and my friends and my loved ones and decided to take some action. And, here I am. Still alive. I'm looking at the right side of the grass. I'm looking at the grass, not the roots. Got a little bit of work to do to get back into shape. To my bosses who might see this, yes, eventually I'm coming back to work, but I got some serious rehab to do in the meantime. As I'm sure most, if not all of you know, I am an avid fisherman, and I'm really looking forward to get back out fishing. But again, I'm not going to push it. All in due time. Catching a nice fish, probably not worth risking my life. I don't know, maybe a big tuna. No, it's not. It's not. And don't worry, I'm not going to push things. So anyway, I hope I didn't bore you with this, and hope you kind of found this interesting, hearing my tale. And this is a tale that, some of you probably know people that have experienced something similar to this. I don't think anybody's experienced everything that I went through. And even my doctor told me when everything was all said and done, he was making his rounds one day, and he said, "How you feeling today?" And this is like 6 days after surgery, and I was starting to feel pretty good, actually. He says, "How you feeling?" And I said, "You know what, Doc, I'm feeling okay." And he says, "Well, I got to tell you," he says, "you have definitely been one of my more, how shall I say, unusual cases." He said, "I'm glad you're feeling better." And he says, "Look, I know right now you're probably not thinking this because you're still in a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort." He says, "But you're going to look back on this 5, 6, 8, 12 weeks from now, whatever. And you're going to look back, you're not going to laugh at it, but you're going to look back and say, you know what? Even though that was a living hell, I can't believe how much better I feel, how many more things I can do, how much more I am enjoying life right now." So I sincerely hope he is correct on that. And believe it or not, I am actually looking forward to getting back to work. And I'm looking forward to get out fishing and doing some traveling and visiting some family and getting back to a normal life. So that's it. See ya.